Hi, I am Shuresh Ghimire, Assistant Extension Educator working on vegetables and hemp at the University of Connecticut Extension. As the dust is settling following the first hemp season in Connecticut, we have the opportunity to reflect on what worked, what didn't, and what changes can be made moving forward. In this presentation, I will cover basic production practices, farmers' experience with growing, harvest, and post-harvest considerations. We will focus our discussion on introduction to hemp, what are the growing requirements from site selection, fertility needs, to cultural practices, including disease and pest management, to harvesting and post-harvest consideration, and we'll also share farmers' experience from 2019 growing season as well. Let's begin with knowing the hemp plant. Hemp and marijuana both are cannabis sativa, so botanically they are indistinguishable from each other. Legally, hemp and marijuana are distinguished by THC content, which is tetrahydrocannabinol. If the cannabis has less than or equal to 0.3 THC, it's hemp, whereas if it has more than 0.3% THC, it's marijuana. THC content is measured on dry weight basis, but measurement methods can differ from state to state or lab to labs. As hemp is an economically potentially a valuable alternative crop, there is an increasing interest in this plant. As some folks may have heard sun hemp and may get confused it with hemp. I'm talking about both types of plant on this slide. Sun hemp is Crotalaria gentiana, also known as brown hemp or Indian hemp, and it's a tropical Asian plant of legume family. Sun hemp is a new summer cover crop for us in the Northeast, and sun hemp and hemp are not related. What hemp is being produced for? There are primarily three production systems: fiber, grain, and flower. Fiber hemp is produced for a stem, which is harvested just before flowering. Fiber hemp is typically planted far densely than two other types of hemp. Grain hemp crop is grown for seed. One of the characteristics of hemp is that it's dioecious, which means male and female plants are separate. For grain production, you will need both male and female plants. Mature seeds are harvested for grain. Now, the primary conversation in Connecticut and entire US is around CBD hemp. Unpollinated flowers are harvested for cannabinoids extraction. So to avoid pollination, it is critical to have isolation distance between grain crop and CBD crop, which we will talk in more details later on in this presentation. There are unique types of cultivars bred for each of these three types of hemp. There are also dual cultivars bred for both fiber and seed. We hear a lot of CBD hemp. What is this CBD? A magical compound believed to have multiple uses. Cannabis has over 60 different cannabinoids. 8 major are listed here, including CBD. These compounds are naturally present in cannabis plant in cannabinoid acid form, and when the plant material goes through processing, which typically involves heat, the cannabinoid acids are converted into cannabinoids like CBD and THC. So, just chewing the high CBD hemp flower, which technically has CBDA, should not provide you any CBD. What are we doing with the hemp? You don't really sell raw hemp in the grocery store or to consumers, although there are some exceptions, which I'll talk about later on. Hemp is a multi-use crop, mainly grown for flowers, fiber, grain, or for environmental remediation, particularly soil. Flowers are harvested unpollinated and through several steps, cannabinoids like CBD or essential oils are extracted. Hemp is also grown for different types of fiber. The outer layer, called bast fiber, is used for quality textiles. Internal fiber, which is called hurd, is used for biocomposite or building materials. Hemp seeds are grown for hemp seed oil, which can be used for making cosmetics and other skincare products. Hemp seeds can also serve as a substitute seeds for other small grains or can be grown as micrograins. There are some evidences to suggest that hemp can remove heavy metals from the ground, also suppresses some pathogenic microbes and nematodes. So it can also be used for environmental remediation. There is some interest in using hemp as livestock feed, but hemp and hemp derivative are not yet approved for use in animal feed in the US. This slide is just to show you the growing hemp production in US. Hemp acreage grew from less than 80,000 acres in 2018 to more than 500,000 acres in 2019, which is about 6.5 times increase um, and that's from less than 4,000 licensed grower in 2018 to more than 16,000 licensed growers in 2019. This slide shows the U.S. import of hemp seed and hemp oil between 2016 and 2018. Vast majority of seed and oil comes from Canada and some from China, Netherlands, and other countries. The growing interest in hemp is to see if we can substitute some of this import as well. Now let's talk about Connecticut hemp. This is a map of our state. The yellow pins point locations where hemp was grown in 2019. This photo is courtesy of Connecticut Department of Agriculture. In 2019, 82 growers got licensed to grow hemp by the end of August, and 65 actually grew hemp in 2019. Total of 158 acres was planted, and of which 100 acres was harvested. 39 different varieties were grown. Now I'm going to present some basic hemp agronomics and growers' experience of hemp in Connecticut from 2019 season. The data used in this presentation is put together from two sources. First, UConn and Connecticut Department of Ag jointly conducted a survey of hemp growers early this winter. Second, the data was pulled from Department of Ag website where they have a summary of 2019 hemp pilot program, which was based on the data submitted by growers. When you see this logo of Connecticut Department of Agriculture, the data came from the latter source. On the survey, we had asked 36 questions, mostly about growing. The survey was sent to all Connecticut hemp growers registered on Connecticut Department of Agriculture email list. We got response from 36 people, which is 53% of the total number of Connecticut hemp growers that grew hemp in 2019. This is a list of things that growers should consider before starting a hemp business and would be most applicable for prospective growers. You will need to get a hemp grower's license from Connecticut Department of Agriculture. You will have to have land, other resources such as water, equipment, and infrastructure to grow, harvest, and dry your hemp. You will need to think about what you will use for your planting materials, seeds, transplants versus clone, because the cost varies. If you have a greenhouse or similar structure, you probably want to grow your own straws. You, you will have to have plans for testing the crop on timely manner so as to track the THC and CBD contents to remain in the expected range. You will have to have plans, equipment, and infrastructures for harvesting and drying of the hemp. Ultimately, what boils down to is whether or not you can profitably grow this crop. So you have to have marketing plans, which is where some folks are struggling from the last growing season. Hemp is a dioecious plant, as mentioned earlier, which means it has separate male and female plants, just like most of us, separate male and female. There are some strains that are monoecious, which where male and female flowers are present in the same plant. Most cultivars grown in Connecticut were photoperiod sensitive, where less than 14 hours of sunlight triggers flowering. Technically, it's the length of darkness that matters. So they mature about the same time, regardless of the planting time. Male plants are generally taller and flower slightly earlier than female and tend to die after shedding pollens. This crop is wind pollinated, so when grown for CBD or seed production, maintaining isolation distance is critical. For seed production, up to 15 miles isolation is recommended. For CBD hemp production, 3 miles isolation is recommended. On the picture on the top is a female flower, picture on the bottom is a male flower. On the survey, we asked our growers the types of seeds they used. Almost two-thirds of the growers who participated on the survey used feminine seeds. When we asked our growers about percentage of male plants identified and logged from CBD hemp grown fields, the numbers were none to 5% where feminine seeds were used and 10 to more than 60% where non-feminine seeds were used. Let's talk about site selection and planting for hemp. All types of hemp grow best in well-drained, sandy loam soils. Try to avoid compacted soils if you can. Making raised beds will help where drainage is poor. Plant after the danger of killing frost or soil temperature is 50 degrees or above. As early summers are often cold in Connecticut, our growers typically raise CBD hemp seedlings in the greenhouse. Recommended seedling depth is half to 3/4 of an inch, but not deeper than 1 inch. Ideal temperature for growing is 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It does not like extended water logging, though short period, less than 48 hours of water logging may not be devastating, based on what I observed this past year. This is a field in Connecticut next day after a heavy rainfall event. At the time of harvest, there was not noticeable difference in the plant vigor between these waterlogged plants and other plants. Hemp thrives full sun. It produces long taproot in loose or friable soil. Sometimes taproots can go up to 6 feet deep in the soil. Soil pH between 6 and 7.5 is good for hemp cultivation. One of the questions on the survey was what production type our farmer had. The vast majority of Connecticut hemp was grown in open field in 2019. There were 7 growers among the respondents, obviously, that grew in greenhouses, and 1 grower grew in the hoop house. This is a graph showing total potential CBD of indoor grown and field grown hemp from University of Vermont. The y-axis is total potential CBD percent, x-axis is growing condition. On this research, they found higher potential CBD for indoor grown hemp compared to outdoor grown hemp across 3 cultivars. This graph is from Connecticut Department of Agriculture report, which includes all growers who grew hemp in 2019. Cherry Blossom, Cherry Wine, and Yongsim 10 were the most popular cultivars grown this past year in Connecticut. These are other cultivars that were grown in 2019. We had quite a bit of cultivars. Connecticut Department of Ag website has a list of certified seed sources, which is not an exhaustive list, but to guide our growers. This is an example of seed source that is listed on the Department of Ag website. You can find a lot of information about seed source on the resource list from the Department of Ag website. Our next question on the survey was about the types of mulches used. Vast majority grew their hemp crop on bare ground. 8 farmers grew on conventional plastic mulch, and a few growers used other mulching materials such as compost, weed mat, and clover mulch. 3/4 of the growers had flat bed, and rest 1/4 grew on raised beds. Vast majority hand transplanted their hemp seedlings, 15% machine transplanted, and 13% direct seeded their crop. 41% of hemp was drip irrigated, 39% was unirrigated, and few other folks had hand watered or used overhead irrigation. This graph is from our survey again and shows the range of percent CBD in the final pre-harvest samples. Most growers reported CBD between 8 and 12%, 50% of which used plastic mulch. 4 reported more than 12% CBD, and 3 of them grew their hemp indoor. So it appears that indoor growing and use of mulching may help with CBD content, but we cannot be definitive as this wasn't a research study. Some of the higher CBD cultivars were Yongsim 10, Cherry Wine, Chardonnay, Hemp Press, and Cherry Blossom. Let's talk about starting seeds indoor. As we have short growing season because of a cold spring and early summer, most growers grow transplants indoor. It normally takes 3 to 4 weeks to raise a transplant from seed to be ready for planting out in the field. There are different sizes of trays that you can use, but it's important to know that if you start on a small cell tray, such as 512 cell or 128 cell tray, you will have to transfer the plants onto a bigger tray before transplanting into the field. 50 cell or 72 cell tray can allow seedlings to be larger before transplanting. How many plants you will need per acre depends on your spacing. Smaller the spacing, greater number of plants you will need per acre. For example, if your spacing is 4 feet plant to plant by 4 feet row to row, you will need 2,722 plants in an acre. Whereas if the spacing is 6 feet by 6 feet, you will need 1,210 plants for an acre. The cost of planting materials is fairly high. For 6 by 6 spacing, it will cost more than $1,000 if you purchase seed at a $1 per seed. You will have to add on this to account for germination loss or for replacement in the field. If you wait for more than 4 weeks to transplant, the excessive root growth in a small cell may lead to root bound, which may affect the crop performance in the field. This picture is of a hemp root at the time of harvest that was root bound when planted. As the root system for this particular plant was weak, wind broke the plant, as you can barely see on the background. When you are propagating plants through cutting, it takes about 10 days to start rooting. You should hurry enough before transplanting in the field to minimize transplanting shock, particularly when seedlings are grown under artificial lights. There are different types of planting materials with varying cost. If you are growing CBD hemp, you can start with feminite seeds or buy clones or buy regular seed, which is a mixture of both male and female seeds. But is all unpollinated flowers are the ones producing higher cannabinoid concentrations. You will have to rug out all the male plants before they release any pollen. For grain and fiber hemp, mixture of male and female or monoecious seeds are fine, as you want pollination and fruit set for grain cultivar. Regular seed are less expensive than feminite seeds, but can have 50% male. Feminite seeds, though they are more expensive, there would be less labor to identify and rug male plants when growing for CBD. Let's talk briefly about seed rate and spacing for grain and fiber hemp. Seeding depth shouldn't be more than 1 inch deep. Seeding rate varies from system to system. Some of the cultivars have smaller seed than others. Generally, approximately 30 pounds of seeds per acre for grain hemp and approximately 50 pounds of seeds per acre for fiber hemp is used. Row spacing is closer for fiber, as you want thin and tall plants to have more outer layer of the fiber. That's called bast fiber. Average grain yield range is anywhere between 600 and 1200 pounds per acre, and the seed contains 30 to 35% oil, and average fiber yield is 3 to 5 ton per acre. We asked our growers about the source of seed. Most growers got their seed from Colorado, followed by Oregon. Growers also got seeds from Kentucky, Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, and Oklahoma. 2 growers got their seeds from Canada. We also asked our growers about the seed germination rates. It was all over the place, as you can see on the graph, and most were around 60 to 70% germination. This means you would have to start with extra 30 to 40% or even more to get the required number of plants. Likewise, you'll need to take account for the potential need for replacement in the field. When we asked our growers if they grow hemp again, what type of planting materials they would want to use, 72% replied feminite seeds and 21% replied clones. Only 7% replied regular seeds. This may imply that identification and roguing male plant wasn't probably an easy job. Like for other crops, hemp also needs nutrients to grow and flower and seed. It is estimated that hemp crop can remove 100 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre. The nutrient requirements varies on so many factors: cultivars, crop density, yield goal, etc. These are suggested rates from UConn, and we hope to fine-tune them as more local info becomes available to us. We asked our growers if they added any additional nitrogen fertilizer post-planting, and 42% replied yes. In coarse soil with low organic matter content, especially when there are frequent or heavy rainfall events, applying total amount of nitrogen in split doses will help to minimize leaching and will increase nitrogen use efficiency. This graph shows spacing between plant to plant and row to row, while the spacing ranged from 2 feet between plants and 3 feet between rows to 10 by 10 feet. Most farmers spaced their plants at 4 by 4 feet or 4 by 5 feet or 3 by 3 feet. As we don't have a lot of pesticide options for disease and pest management, it is critical to have a good airflow in the plot to minimize pest infestation, which can be achieved by adequately spacing the plants. This graph shows the planting dates for all the hemp farms in Connecticut. In 2019, planting started in early June and continued until mid-August for field-grown hemp. Vast majority of hemp fields were planted in July. Let's talk about pest management and start with weed. As there are not a lot of pesticides to use on hemp for in-season weed management, good cultural practices are important to manage weeds. Weed management options may include stale seedbed technique, where weeds are promoted and killed in very early stage before planting the main crop. Other options could be mulching, cover crops, cultivation between the rows. Dense planting helps to close canopy and shade weeds quickly, as hemp grows very quickly and reaches up to 1 foot tall within 3 to 4 weeks during warm weather. We will talk about available herbicides later in this presentation. Major diseases of hemp in our area reported in 2019 were botrytis, also called gray mold, sclerotinia, also called white mold, and septoria leaf spot. Other potential diseases are fusarium root rot and powdery mildew. Upper picture is of gray mold. Uh, the lower left is white mold. Lower middle two are fusarium root rot, and the bottom right is powdery mildew. Some good cultural practices that promote air movement and light penetration reduce the chances of disease. Those include adequate plant spacing. Spacing will vary for different cultivars, but in general, 5 feet by 5 feet or little more is commonly used. Avoid wetting leaves by using overhead irrigation. Maintain plant health with proper nutrition and irrigation practices. Select planting sites with adequate lights. Promote natural enemies, that is, predatory insects, by planting beneficial insectary plant in or around the field. Insectary plants are those that attract insects. Cover crops like clover, peas, buckwheat, Other flowers like marigold, sunflower attract beneficial insects. Our Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection (DEEP) released a pesticide guidance document and a list of pesticides that can be used in hemp, which we will see after a couple of slides. Major insects in a hemp field in Connecticut were European corn borer and corn earworm, as both are major pests and established pests of corn in our region. They can easily transfer to hemp fields. They can be monitored using pheromone traps and can be managed using available insecticides. Other potential pests are aphids, Japanese beetles, tarnished plant bugs, mites, and western black flea beetles. There are a few biopesticides and other less toxic pesticides that are available to use on hemp, which are available on the DEEP website. As mentioned earlier, insects like European corn borer, corn earworm, and Japanese beetles can be monitored using pheromone traps. Aphids, flea beetles, and many other, especially small insects, can be monitored or be controlled in a small scale by yellow sticky trap. In a small scale, pruning of infested plants and removing caterpillars by hand picking may also be practical. Insectary plants grown around perimeter can provide beneficial insects like green lacewings, syrphid flies, collops beetle, damsel bugs, and others. This is Connecticut DEEP webpage with guidance for the section of pesticides for use on hemp in Connecticut. There is a list of pesticides in Excel and PDF. There are currently 150 pesticides listed that include fungicide, insecticide, miticides, nematicides, and herbicides. Those primarily include biologicals, botanical pesticides that are approved for use for other crops in organic production systems. These are some names of the ingredients of those pesticides listed by Connecticut DEEP. Let's go back to the survey results. When we asked our growers what was the intensity of pest damage to the crop from several pests, most reported insects were most problematic, followed by weeds and diseases. There was a case each of deer and flood damage as well. And most growers did not do anything special to manage the pests. Some other growers use cultural practices, pesticides, biological control, neem, beneficial insects, and fencing to manage their pests. As hemp was not grown for grain in 2019 in Connecticut, we will devote only a slide to grain harvesting in case there is an interest on that moving forward. Grain hemp is harvested when shattering begins. Seed heads mature from bottom up. Only 70 to 75% of seeds are ripe at this point. Grain is between 22 to 30% moisture. Plants are still green at harvesting, and conventional combine can be used to harvest. Fiber is windrowed between early bloom and seed set and left in the field for about 5 weeks for retting, which is a process in which pectinous substances that bind together elemental bast fiber becomes degraded. When fibers are less than 15% moisture content, it is round or square-belled. The outer layer of the hemp is called bast fiber again, and the inner is called hurd. CBD hemp is harvested at its peak flowering. CBD and THC testing can be used to predict the best harvesting time. Weather is critical to yield and quality. You don't want to harvest during or right after rain or early in the morning before the dew dries. Hand harvesting of whole plants is standard. Immediate drying at moderate temperature, which is 10 degrees Fahrenheit more than ambient, with good ventilation is important to maintain quality of the floral materials. Some farmers in Connecticut used their tobacco trailer to haul hemp, as shown in the picture here. Some growers dried hemp in warehouse with dehumidifier and heater installed. They used nylon nets to vertically hang the floral materials. Ideal drying temperatures for plants should be around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit with 45 to 55% humidity to ensure even drying with minimal damage. Under these conditions, buds should dry down within 3 to 5 days, though larger buds may take 4 or more additional days to dry. While higher temperatures can allow you to dry down buds at a faster rate, many aromatic compounds such as terpenes begin to volatilize at temperatures in excess of 70 degrees Fahrenheit and can also lead to cannabinoid degradation. Some growers hung the whole plant in tobacco shade for drying, and it also worked well. This table shows the change in total potential CBD with 3 different drying temperatures. The data is from University of Vermont. The potential CBD went down when temperature was more than 80 degrees, actually 86 degrees, and 35% relative humidity compared to drying at 80 degrees and 75% humidity. While the use of higher temperatures result in faster drying rates, producers should consider the potential impact of drying temperature on the quality of their products. So more than 80 degrees is not recommended. In the final pre-harvest THC test, 89% of the hemp plots passed the test, meaning the delta 9 THC was less than 0.3% by weight. Rest of the plots had higher than 0.3% THC, which was 11% of the plot. Growers were also allowed to commingle crops with analysis of the commingled lot conducted by the regulatory agency to show that the final crop was at or below the 0.3% THC threshold. When THC contents were compared for 2 popular cultivars, 81% of the plots with Yongsim 10 passed the THC test, whereas 94% of the cherry blossom passed the test. Again, this data came from Connecticut Department of Agriculture. This graph shows the harvest dates for all the hemp plots in Connecticut, except one plot. Harvesting started in mid-September and continued until early November. Vast majority of the hemp fields were harvested in mid to late October. 99% of the hemp grown in Connecticut was grown for flowers, that is for cannabinoids, and 1%, which is only one farm, grew hemp for fiber in 2019. Most growers dried their hemp in barn or tobacco shade. Some folks dried hemp in greenhouse, warehouse, or hoop house. Almost one-third of our hemp growers sold their crops directly to consumers. Another one-third sold their produce to processors or manufacturers, and the rest one-third haven't yet found a market as of last December. If we look at the national figure, about 65% of the US hemp farmers in 2019 lacked buyers for their crops, and this is according to the Whitney Economics Field of Dreams survey. Knowing the production systems varied a lot for growers, it is uncommon to see such differences in yield. We are looking at yield of dry flowers for different farmers. Yield per acre ranged from 800 pounds per acre to 4,000 pounds per acre. Some other growers reported yield per plant, which was 0.5 pound plant to 0.75 pounds per plant. The grower who reported 4,000 pounds per acre used a cherry blossom cultivar. This graph is showing the cost of growing per acre. Again, as the growers had different production systems, the cost of growing ranged from $400 per acre to $15,000 per acre, except one grower who spent $35,000 per acre. This graph is showing the revenue per acre from growing hemp in Connecticut. For those who were able to sell their crops, it ranged from $7,000 to $35,000 per acre. I would like to share with you some innovative marketing approaches used by growers in New England and New York. A grower in Vermont has applied the pick your own concept to hemp. A 1,500-acre organic farm in New York tried selling fresh hemp leaves as green. Some of these techniques may be applicable to your operation as well. When we asked our growers what went well for them this past season, these were the responses. Overall growing went well for most folks. Weather was nice last year, particularly later in the season toward harvest season. Some folks took their first season as the season of learning, research, and experience. This is a list of most difficult issues our growers dealt with this past season. Having desired level of cannabinoids, the regulations, not understanding how to handle the finished products for a buyer, and testing for contaminants and other components such as heavy metal, pesticide residue, mycotoxin, and microbials, poor germination rate, corn borer, male plants were the issues that were difficult to deal with. In addition, soil pH, thefts, lack of buyers, getting license, harvesting practices, not having buyers and processor information, labor, pest, and late planting were some more issues that were difficult to deal with for our growers. There are risks and many unknowns in this business. There are so many sources of seeds, and finding a reliable seed source can be difficult. What are the reliable sources of hemp seeds is one of the most common questions I get from growers, and I don't have a good answer. With the new interim rule, THC testing is going to be more expensive, and in case the crop goes high, how to deal with that? I think there are some risks around that. As hemp is a resilient plant, it has the potential to be an invasive crop. There are limited availability of agrochemicals, so there is risk in managing pests. As mentioned earlier, there were cases of thefts, so it can be risky along that line as well. We don't have good ideas about how hemp economics and markets are going to look like in near future. We still don't know which cultivars will perform the best in our climates and soil, and what cropping systems would be most profitable for our growers, and what would be the environmental impacts associated with the crop. This is my last slide. What you are seeing here is a bag at the Charleston City Market in South Carolina. This bag is made from hemp fiber and was made in Nepal. That's all I have. Thank you so much for watching this.